Hello there, my name is Damien O'Reilly and you're very welcome to the National Botanic Gardens here in Glasnevin in Dublin. In fact, I'm right here in the Teagasc College for Amenity, Horticulture, and we're talking about sustaining plant diversity into the future. It's the title as part of Science Week, and the beautiful gardens here, they're about more than just recreation. It's about conserving threatened plants. It's about learning more into the research of conserving plants. And it's also about educating future gardeners. So we're here today to talk to some of the staff at the Botanic Gardens and indeed in the Teagasc College as well. It seems so strange that water can actually flow upwards on a tree because it seems that it would defy the laws of physics.
Exactly. One of the extraordinary things is you can pick a bunch of flowers and we can put them in a pot of water and they'll sit there for several weeks, staying alive, sucking the water up through tiny little pores in their stems. And yet trees defy the laws of physics because there comes a limit to how high you can suck water. So if you took a straw and put it in a glass of water and sucked the water up, that's easy enough. But imagine if that straw was a metre long. Now you've got a whole sort of metre of water, this great column of water, and it's starting to get heavier. It's harder to pull up. Now if you imagine a tree such as a giant sequoia, 100 metres tall, it is a phenomenal problem because here is the rub. The real problem lies on if you set up a steel or glass pipe and you started sucking water up it with a very powerful pump. There comes a point at 10 metres, just 10 metres, where that water starts to boil. It boils at room temperature, that ambient temperature, because water cannot rise higher than 10 metres because that is a perfect vacuum above it. So how on earth does water get up 100 metres? And this was a problem that presented itself to both botanists and physicists for many years. And 100 years ago, in Trinity College, two professors, a professor of physics, John Joly, and the professor of botany, Henry Dixon, sat about devising a theory. They came up with a theory which goes with the rather cumbersome name of the cohesion tension theory. And it covers two aspects of water. One is cohesion. Cohesion is what holds things together. So water is held together. Water molecules are remarkable because they are polar molecules. Unlike many other liquids we know, a molecule of water with its two hydrogen atoms and its oxygen atom has a positive pole and a negative pole. And this means that the two molecules next door to one another are bonded together by something we refer to as a hydrogen bond. And these molecules are therefore held together with great strength. It gives water this extraordinary feature of having surface tension. You can float, if you take a little bit of paper and you put a paper clip on it and float that in a glass of water, the paper will sink and the paper clip will stay floating even though it's made of metal and is heavier than the water. And this effect of cohesion that the water has enables water molecules in this tree to literally be pulling one molecule after another from the ground upwards. Now, critics of this theory said that's like believing in ropes made of sand, that as soon as you pull this little column of water, it should snap. It should break at 10 metres above ground level. The fact that it can go to 100 metres in height is because as each molecule of water evaporates from a leaf, it literally pulls the next molecule up, and that molecule in turn pulls the molecule behind, and there is a chain of water molecules from the top of this tree right down to the roots, pulling each molecule one after another. And that is how this tree achieves the feat of defeating the scientific fact that a physicist would say water cannot be pulled higher than 10 metres above ground level.
My name is Dr. Paul Fitters. I'm a lecturer here in the College of Amenity Horticulture, the Teagasc College of Amenity Horticulture here in the National Botanic Gardens.
So Paul, tell me a little bit more about your journey to the Botanic Gardens.
Okay, I'm originally from Holland, where I studied horticulture in Wageningen University. And then I got a job in Maynooth College to work on black vine weevil, which is a troublesome pest, in biological controlling that pest with worms. And then in 2003 I applied for the job here in the National Botanic Gardens and got it, and I have been here ever since. Okay, I'm going to graft a sorbus today, Sorbus commixta dodong, up onto a rootstock from another sorbus. But before you do anything, you need to have a sharp knife. So this is my grafting knife and a sharpening tool, and I'm just going to sharpen it, and then once on the back, because this bit should be flat and this bit should be beveled. The next thing is then, or the second thing is your sorbus rootstock. So this is a seedling of a sorbus, nothing special, although it has a little bit of autumn color. And I'll just chop off the top. So it has a nice root system, very strong stem, and on top of this I'm going to put this new sorbus that is grown for its beautiful autumn color, dodong. So then we go to the Sorbus commixta dodong, the cultivar that I'm going to graft on top of this tree, and this is the shoot I took from that tree, and I need to have as much surface area as I can to connect it to the tree there. So the trick to graft is put the knife in very flat, put your thumb on the other side of the wood, and then effectively pull out from your shoulders. So no carving, it should be a smooth movement. And if you do that, you get a very relatively long cut that should be perfectly flat. The next thing is to match this to this, and as I said, it's a bit of carpentry. This stem is much thinner than this one, so I'm going to take a sliver off the rootstock to match this. And in order to know how far I need to cut, I'm going to hold this against it. So the length is roughly to here. Put my knife in and take a sliver off. Check if it's the same width. It can be slightly wider. And this is a fairly good match. The next thing to do is make this workable. At the moment it's quite long, and I only need 3, at most 4 buds. So in this case, I'm going to go 3 buds. So I'm going to take the top off, take a piece of rubber, and see if I can tie this in. So to tie in the rubber band, it's just a rubber band, it needs to be very tight, so you pull it, hold it on top of the sign wood, go around both of them so that they're tied together, do that twice, then go to the bottom of the sign wood, and then the last time I'll put my finger in between, so when I come around again I can roll the rubber band down and it's caught. And then you have a nice firm sorbus. So this is my deep fat fryer, and there's this special wax in it and it's just melted. So I'm going to give it a quick dip just to cover it, only the union bit and the top, the cyanwood, and then straight away out. Yeah, so here it goes. Okay, and you can see the whole surface has been waxed. And when the tree grows out next spring, it'll just crack the wax and it'll grow out of it. So these buds hopefully will form the basis of the new tree. So grafting is really a process of carpentry, and you can do it at home, but be aware of the sharp knives and possible injuries, so be very careful.
My name is Felicity Gaffney, and I'm Head of Education here at the National Botanic Gardens. I manage the guide service, and we develop different education programs for children, adults, and all the school groups that come in as well. And I also manage the events and the exhibition programs. People just love a green space, and I think particularly in the first lockdown, people really began to engage with nature and slow down a little bit and actually look around and appreciate nature more, and where better to do it than here, really.
So Felicity, we actually do have our very own rainforest here.
Yes, we have Ireland's only tropical rainforest, and it's in the Great Palm House. And that's actually a big glass house that we'll be in, and it is full of giant palm trees, the fastest growing bamboo in the world, and all sorts of plants from the tropics, from Brazil to Africa to all around the world.
You're going to tell me a little bit more about the palm tree.
The palm tree is a super crop. It is the most important plant, economic plant from the tropics. We've all heard of palm oil. And maybe we don't think so much about it here, but it's in absolutely almost everything that we eat. It's in crisps, it's in lipstick, it's in shampoo, it's in chocolate, it sets ice cream. It's in absolutely everything.
And palm oil is something that all of us use in our daily lives.
Yeah, and incredibly, 70% of all personal care products are derived from palm oil derivatives, which is something that we just don't think about. Often they're not even labelled. So it's a wonder crop, it's a fantastic crop. 3 billion people use it. And up to each individual uses up to 8 kgs a year, which is quite an incredible amount to think about. And that's spaced over 350 countries. Palm trees are grown in massive, massive plantations, and obviously they harvest the fruit and the kernel from it.
So where do these palm trees grow commercially?
Originally, palm trees grew natively in South Africa. And then in the times of the colonies, they were brought over to Malaysia and Indonesia. And massive plantations came out of that. Now, ironically, 85% of the palm oil that's produced in the world is grown in those two countries. It covers over 10% of the total global land that's used for crops is devoted to palms and growing palm trees. Of course, this has been great news economically for these countries because it has given a lot of export material, created a lot of employment, and people are feeling, in some cases very happy about it, but there has been a cost. The cost is to the environment, first of all, because in order to grow these plantations, obviously land is needed. So what has happened traditionally is that virgin rainforest has been clear felled or burnt to the ground, and the plantations come in, and that's fine. However, the impact that would have, first of all, as we can realise, would be biodiversity loss, because all of the plants and the different animals that would have lived in these forests now are facing devastation, destruction and extinction. And these include the orangutan, the Sumatran tiger and the Sumatran rhino.
Is anything being done in these countries to try and protect the habitats of the orangutan, for example?
People now are becoming more aware, and there's no point in just saying we're not going to use palm oil anymore, because that's going to have devastating effects on the economies of the people. We don't want to take away their livelihoods either. However, there are two things that's happening at the moment. The first thing is, it's a board called the RSPO. That's the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil Production. And obviously that speaks for itself. They try to have sustainable production that is so that the palm oil that you're buying or is in your foods and all those other products comes from sustainable means and people-friendly means. The other thing is work has been done on genetic signature of new palms. So selecting all the different palms and selecting the best palms that will give the best yield. At the moment, the best yield that they can get is 6 tonnes of oil per palm. But some palms have been known to double this. So the idea is that they will select these better yielding palm trees and replace the older ones as they die off with these. And the result of this will be less forest will need to be clear felled.
I'm Colin Kelleher, so I'm the keeper of the herbarium and the molecular lab in the National Botanic Gardens. So what we do in the herbarium is curate over 600,000 specimens of dried plants. And then in the molecular lab, we look at genetic diversity of those plants, or some of those plants.
Can you explain to me, what is plant genetic diversity?
Plant genetic diversity then would be the variation in the individual genes inside in the plants. So essentially, genes are the building blocks of diversity. And then even down from that, you have the individual base pairs of the DNA. And really, it's investigating that variation to try and look for patterns or to look for evolutionary lineages and to try and understand plants and also to try and characterize them in a group, a sort of a grouping or a relationship. So these are some of the species that we're working on: alder, birch and oak. You can see the alder and the birch have their catkins on, ready for the spring. If we're sampling for the oak, all that we need to do is take a single leaf and then we label that up, put it in an envelope and put it into silica gel. So this is a bag of silica gel and we put it into the bag of silica gel. This is basically it's biochemically inactive then. So it'll store in the silica gel forever. And then we have a tissue bank that we keep all these samples in that they can be used in future if they're needed. So this is the DBM Plant Molecular Lab in the National Botanic Gardens. And so we took a sample then of oak, and we have multiple samples all across Ireland. And so what we do in here is then we take a small piece of that leaf and put it into a tube, break up the plant material, extract out the DNA, and then we look for sequence differences. And we use various different molecular markers to look for sequence differences. With this sequence, you can see that these dots here show you differences in the entire sequence. Within the sequence variation, we look for patterns to match up Irish populations with European populations. And we also look at the diversity within Irish populations to see how variable they are. And by doing that, we hope to further understand what variability is within Irish populations, and then use that for future monitoring and for conservation of forest genetic resources into the future.
So here we have the aloe ferox. Ferox comes from the Latin word for fierce. And just taking a look at this plant, you can see it's covered in spines on the upper and underside of the beautiful leaves. So the story I'm going to talk about is how important science is for the lives of people. This plant is a very, very important plant in South Africa for the livelihoods of thousands of people. This is in the aloe family, so it is related to aloe vera. Aloe vera is grown commercially. However, this plant, 95% of it is harvested in the wild. It is indigenous to southern Africa. So inside these leaves, we have a bitter juice, sometimes called the bitter aloe. And this is used medicinally. So people say that it has antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory and even anti-cancer properties. We can also harvest gel from the plant. So that's used in cosmetics, very much like aloe vera would be. In South Africa, some of the most poor and undereducated, I suppose, people rely on this plant for survival. A study was done on the households in the Eastern Cape that rely on this plant, and they found that in 21 out of 22 households there where people harvest the plant, that was their primary income. The people collecting the plant were middle-aged women, so they were supporting their family by harvesting this plant in the wild. This plant is very important for people's livelihood. It's important in itself. We need to protect it. And so, with that in mind, it is listed on an international convention that protects endangered species of flora and fauna, so plants and animals. This international convention is called CITES for short. So that's a convention on the trade of endangered species. So this plant is listed, and that means that its trade is restricted. That would seem at first glance to be a very good idea, but there is a lot of nuance to this. Initially, it was listed on the second appendix of CITES, so that means it's not in danger of extinction, but it is protected. And that meant that to export and import the plant, you needed a license. That does make the industry for these people who rely on it almost impossible because it's so expensive to get the license. So 4 delegates from South Africa came to this conference, the big World Wildlife Conference in Geneva, and they had to persuade the people making the decision who were voting that this plant needed to have a sort of amendment made in this convention because the industry was so important to the livelihoods of so many people. So what they proposed was that the trade of the plant itself and the raw extract would be under some restrictions, but that the export of the finished product would be open. Previously, the raw juice was exported and it was processed mostly in Europe and North America. But now this new ruling encourages the processing to take place in South Africa, so that should help their economy as well. And so that was a big decision to make because this plant hasn't been fully assessed. We're not exactly sure of the population, how healthy it is in the wild, whether or not the population is healthy enough to be sustainable. So that needs further review. So that is really one of the examples of why conservation botany is so important, because it doesn't just affect the plant, it affects the whole system. And so one of our botanists here was present at that conference, Dr. Nolene Smith. She was one of the 10 people who basically got to decide the future of the harvesting of this plant. So the harvesters traditionally don't harvest all the leaves from a plant. They know that they must leave some and that they must let it regenerate. In a good day, they'll collect about 1,000 leaves when the conditions are right, and they might get 20 to 25 litre buckets full of sap. So I'm going to show you what the sap looks like now. I'm going to cut into one of these leaves of our aloe ferox.